Kill Team has been giving us tons of absolute blasts from the past, resurrecting some really cool units from Warhammer's history, and probably the most surprising one to come back is the Adeptus Arbites. And yes, the appropriate pronunciation is Beady, which I don't prefer. I've always called them the Adeptus Arbites, because bite just sounds so much more intimidating and aggressive, but no, in fact, it is called the Arbites, which I think is something that you would name a small dog. Like, ooh, look at the little beady, oh, so cute. I don't know, it just doesn't fill me with dread, but speaking of dread, why I never thought these guys would come back to Warhammer's catalog is because these guys are kind of blatantly ripoffs of Judge Dredd. Now, these new models aren't quite as blatant as the old pewter models, but in a side-by-side comparison, I think we're seeing the same thing here. I actually have two plans moving forward on these guys. One of them involves the bases, and I'm actually gonna have a little bit of help with the painting. But now it is time to paint up the judge, juries, and executioners of the Warhammer world, which still kind of describes everybody, except the Tau. And another reason the police have been on my mind lately is because I recently had a run-in with the law, and at some point during this project, I'm gonna have to put it on pause because I have a court date. The Arbites enforce the laws on the Imperial worlds, and to represent those Imperial worlds, I want to make some industrial bases. And I want to try out some basing bits for my upcoming Necromunda gang, so I'll be stealing the bases from my Escher gals for the cops. If it works, I'll get new bases for the gangers. Now technically these are the wrong bases. These are 25mm bases, and the Arbites are meant to stand on the ever so slightly bigger 28.5mm base. And it is advantageous to be on smaller bases, so I am cheating. But I don't think it's gonna matter because I don't win games anyway. I broke out some industrial bits from my collection of epic basing bits. These pipes and wires should be the perfect thing. To make sure I leave enough room on the bases, I stuck my minis down with some poster putty and filled in all the extra spaces with pipes. These cops are investigating a manufacturing sector, and to show the grime, I stippled on some texture paste. Now these bases are looking like they're part of a larger environment. To set myself up for success, I put the bases on a sticky palette I made with some painter's tape and cardboard, so now all 12 of these bases can be painted as one big base. And the models I stuck down to painting handles with some double stick tape. I want to try really hard on these models and pull out all the stops. And I left their fancy shoulder pads on the sprue as they're arranged nice and neatly. I've got these guys all prepped and ready to go, and my instincts of how to paint Arbites would probably be airbrush base coat, a little bit of contrast paint and speed paints, brush on highlights, a little bit of freehanding, and then call it a day. But the great thing about Kill Team is it's just one small warband, and so it gives me a great opportunity to try out some new things. And today's sponsor is also going to give me a great opportunity to try out new things. Miniature Painting Made Easy is a Kickstarter for a collection of physical books designed to help you progress in your painting journey. These books are written by some of the best painters in the world, and in print format, they can offer more insight into painting than your average tutorial. Volume 1 contains everything you need to know to get started with painting, and you might find some tips that slip by you even if you have a lot of painting experience under your belt. Volume 2 is all about painting quickly and efficiently, with 20 tutorials full of tips and tricks and different painting styles to get good-looking models onto the tabletop. And Volume 3 is about breaking past acrylic paint and getting into the world of inks, enamels, oils, and other art tools to make your models even better. Along with these 3 physical books, this project is also making 3 plastic miniatures designed to work perfectly alongside the tutorials and techniques found in these books and be the perfect canvas to learn on. Having looked through these tutorials myself, I found Katarzyna Gorska's Colorful Wizard and Mark Masklin's Savvy Hunter tutorials particularly inspiring. This project is live now. Follow the link in the description below to check out this exciting and unique series for yourself and get some more painting knowledge. For my Exaction squad, I'm gonna be following along with Will Hahn's Vibrant Sons of Medusa guide. I really like how incredibly color saturated the model is, and I have a boatload of inks behind me that I don't do nearly enough with, so this should give me a good opportunity to see how to get the most out of them. Following Will's tutorial to the letter, I primed the minis black. I threw this on the bases too while the primer was still in my airbrush. Then I sprayed on some dark rust at a 60° zenithal, covering most of the mini, then a lighter rusty brown from above, hitting the top. And then it was time to protect these layers with a matte varnish. I've got all the underpainting done on these guys, and I don't know why I never thought of it, but obviously you put a varnish under chipping medium. I've used chipping medium before, and I always have to be really careful not to scratch all the way down to bare plastic, but the varnish should keep it nice and safe, because now it's time to do the real painting. I hosed down the models with some chipping medium and then covered everything up with a nearly black dark blue. And here is where I broke from Will's instructions. I don't want my guys to be vibrant green, I want them to be vibrant blue. And I think if I follow along with all the same steps, but I just shift them from green to blue, I'll end up with the same effect. I found a blue that matched the vibrancy of the green base coat he used and sprayed it on, doing a 45-degree zenithal covering about half the mini, then moving up to a brighter blue, and then a brighter blue still. And then it was time for inks. In Will's tutorial, he emphasizes the importance of white under a transparent ink. The light will shine through the color and then reflect off the white to make the color extra vibrant. I sprayed white ink strategically on the heads and shoulders and upper chest of the mini, letting it splash around onto other details but keeping these spots contained. I also painted the shoulder pads with a white stripe down the center, and then it was time for the ink. Inks are super vibrant transparent paints, and I have a couple of options, but none of them I am in love with. The turquoise is a little bit too opaque and the indigo is too dark. So I found this contrast paint and I think it'll be perfect. It's a phthalo green color, which will be particularly perfect as Will used a yellow ink in addition to green to make a more visually interesting color. This greenish blue will make my blues more striking. This worked out phenomenally well, and he was absolutely right. The white with a tint looks way better than just continuing to layer up lighter and lighter opaque colors. The model is looking so good I almost forgot about that chipping medium under there. I wetted the model with some clean water and took a stiff brush and a toothpick and began ripping off the lovely blue, letting the rusty brown peek through. I think my blues look just as striking as his greens, and Will used white for the Space Marine's heads, where I used white for the shoulder pads. It always works to have a big, bright contrast spot on the model. That armor is absolutely glowing, and I haven't touched a paintbrush yet, and these guys are already feeling pretty close to done. But speaking of done, there's two little things I want to do before I can return to Will Hahn's instructions. The Arbites have a few extra details not present on the Space Marine, like their cloth under armor, which I picked out with a darker blue contrast paint, which is transparent and will take advantage of the painting I've already done, and give me a one-coat solution. And then the mask on the helmet, I want white just like the shoulder pads, so I base coated these with a blue-gray and highlighted up to pure white with some wet blending. Now that I've got the unique bits of the Arbites all picked out, I can get back to the step-by-step. To base coat all the weapons, I followed Will's advice to mix black ink into black acrylic paint to give the paint more fluidity while keeping it saturated, and it worked like a charm. And then I mixed up 3 shades of blue-gray and applied these over the black in smaller and smaller passes to build up highlights. And at this step, Will also painted the pouches to look like leather, using 2 brown colors which stand out strongly against the vibrant colors. A kind of funny thing about the Adeptus Arbites is that for a brief time in Warhammer's history, they were the best unit in the game. Not because they had amazing guns or incredible close combat, but because they were incredibly cheap. Costing only 35 points for a squad of 5 guys with 4 up saves, they were the best thing for objective camping. However, since the fall errata, they now cost a very reasonable 110 points for 10 guys, so still cheap and still an interesting unit, but definitely not the auto-include it used to be. And speaking of things being ruled on and changing, I have to go to court. My car was ticketed as an unregistered vehicle, but my registration is all up to date, and I have all the paperwork I need to prove my innocence. After a few tense seconds, the judge agreed with me. My ticket was dismissed, and I took that money I would have paid to the state, and I went to the Warhammer store, and I got Zodgrod Wartsnaga for my orc army. It feels really good to win, and now it is time to get back to these Arbites weapons. Matching the tutorial, I painted all the upper-facing weapon parts with a gunmetal color, leaving the gray highlights to represent the unpainted parts of each weapon, and a silver highlight over this. And for the gold elements, I made up a cold gold out of some silver paint and yellow ink, and I put this over all the eagle symbols these guys are covered in. At this point, the minis were getting close, and I painted their faces and picked out their visors with a bright red ink, and then it was time to take a break from acrylics. One thing I find very valuable about following along with somebody else's painting tutorial is it forces me to try new things. Like this next step involves using enamel panel liner, and I've never used enamel panel liner before, so let's see what happens. The panel liner really soaks in, and Will's suggestion to apply this without a gloss varnish first so the matte finish would catch more of the paint worked really well. This stuff flows really fast, and in a few places where I put it on too heavy, I came back in with some white spirits and toned it down a little bit. Interesting. It definitely has a very different look wet versus dry. When it dries super, super matte, so you'll lose that like really harsh, dark contrast. Although I wonder if I could get some of that back with a little bit of varnishing. And it's drying really, really quick, which is nice. While I wait for the rest of these guys to dry, I am gonna work on the Doggo. It seems like every warband Games Workshop makes these days features a 4-legged friend, and this guy is a lot of fun. He's mostly robot, so the only thing to paint is his butt. I base coated and highlighted with a brown and then mixed in some white paint and did a few layers of thin lines all over to highlight and make it look like he has a furry texture that stands out next to his robot parts. After working all the way up to white, I glazed back in with the original brown to get the color back. He is a very good boy. And now, following along with the instructions, it is time for the bases. Will paints these bases very similar to the original rust base coat on the models, an orangey brown sprayed at an extreme 70-degree angle, and then a zenith olive orange. And you know what else could use a zenith olive orange? That's right, our Patreon. Over there we have a new terrain pack, the Gothic Administratum, a grimdark cathedral that can be assembled destroyed or intact. And now to get these suckers glued down, and I can already see the crazy vibrancy of the blue and the orange separating these models perfectly from the bases. And to push that vibrancy up a notch, some pigment powders. This step blends the Arbites feet into the base and makes it look realistic. Then we'll use the yellow pigment powder, which I don't own, but I do own a yellow pastel. So I carved off the end and squished and prepared it into a powder. It's not perfect, a mortar and pestle would have helped to really turn it into dust, but it worked, and a quick dusting of matte varnish will lock the pigments into place. Now at this point, the models are finished, but Will offers a trick to make certain minis stand out, and that is to apply hazard stripes. Mixing white ink into white paint makes a much thinner white with more coverage, and I freehanded this over the officer's shield and the sniper's gun. Then some yellow paint over the white and a little orange ink to shade the bottom half of these hazard patches. Painting hazard stripes is some of the most fun you can have while painting. I highly suggest it, and to finish it off with some sponging of rusty brown, which I cleaned up with a brush. Ooh, these guys are spicy. The blue on top of the orange really pops, and it was a joy to paint with somebody else's instruction because there was really no decision making. It was all just following along and trying stuff out. I now have an Arbites Exaction Squad for use in Kill Team to play cops and robbers, and I could even take these in Big 40k. Ooh, actually, I could take these and a repressor tank in Big 40k, and then I could have a law enforcement branch of my Black Templar. Thanks again to Miniature Painting Made Easy. I am looking forward to following along with all of the other tutorials in the book. Thanks for watching.